Westholme is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. Westholme believes that when nature leads, flavor follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
This is What Doesn't Kill You Food Industry Insights. I am your host, Katie Kiefer. And today we're returning to one of my very favorite topics. Guess what it is, people? I know you know. It's water. Mary Grant, my guest, who is the Public Water for All director for the Food and Water Watch organization, one of my favorite advocacy groups. Mary Grant is joining us. Mary, I couldn't find any other information about you. Normally, I like to give a nice long bio intro so people can like bask in the knowledge that my guest is going to deliver the real goods in terms of information. But I couldn't actually. Your Food and Water Watch is very skimpy with their bios. So is there anything you want to tell us about yourself, or are you just good? You've been at Food and Water Watch for a while, I saw.
Yeah, I've been here since 2008. I started as a researcher working on our water research against water privatization. I'm a water utility privatization expert. But since 2015, I've been the Public Water for All campaign director at Food and Water Watch. So I work with our team across the country, our team of organizers, offices across the country on campaigns to support safe, affordable, and publicly controlled water.
Oh my God, I love you. I knew you were the right person. You know, Mary, we're going to have a few conversations, assuming you enjoy your experience today, which I promise you will. Everybody does. Well, most people anyway. But so we're going to talk about water futures because I know that I did a show about this like 3 years ago. I think probably in response to that first effort to sell water futures. But I feel like I never really fully grasped what the water futures market could look like. So let's start by defining water futures and what market there is for them, and then we'll get into the granular.
Sure, sounds great. So in December 2020, probably around when you had your first
that was it.
About this, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, or CME, launched the first ever water futures market. So this was big news. It was the world's first. Mm-hmm. And water futures allow investors to bet on water prices of water in California. It's basically gambling on California's water prices. It was launched after California had a really devastating wildfire season, and they wanted to provide a way for investors to profit from price increases due to water scarcity because they were anticipating another major drought.
So, you know, somehow I find that so incredibly cynical. I'm just literally stunned. So let's roll that back. You're saying that that financial institutions were looking for a mechanism by which they could potentially profit on scarcity of life's most precious substance besides air. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's basically what happened. So the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the actual commodity market itself, launched this product, the futures product. So it allows speculators to make a bet on what the future price of water will be based on an index of water trades in the state. And if the speculator, the investor, wins the bet, they get money, they get profit. So it's cash settled. It doesn't actually deliver water, which is an important distinction. So at the end of it, the only thing you get is money. So it's not about delivering water, improving water access. It's about making money off of water prices in California.
And off of potentially a scarcity in water where people are suffering, having to move and things like that. So this is only taking place in California water. They're not speculating, say, on the Ogallala Aquifer or, I don't know, the size of the dead zone. I mean, I'm so gobsmacked by the whole thing. But it's only just the state of California where this particular water futures market has been launched and maintained until now.
Yeah, so far it's only based on water trades in California. It's based on a price index called the NASDAQ Valley's Water Index, which is like a kind of a secret formula and a secret list of transactions. It's not disclosed to the public. It creates this price index, and then the trades are based on that price index. that estimates the price of water in California, but it's nowhere else yet. And it's because there's not a lot of good data for other places. So once like you have more transactions along the Colorado River that are tracked and collected and monetized by these indexes,
Right.
there's potential for this idea to spread.
Wow. I'm just, why is this legal? I don't understand why this is even legal. Because
So
I mean,
that
doesn't it offer a tremendous opportunity for market manipulation, exploitation of resources? I don't know. I mean, it just seems rife for illegality.
Yeah, for abuse. It's one of the most concerning parts. So futures products like the water futures product are all self-certified that they comply with law. So the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the commodity market, CME, decided to create it, and then it
Right.
created it. And it began trading on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange after filing for self-certification. So there's an entity called the Commodity Futures Trading Commission that's supposed to regulate these types of commodity markets, but they don't look at self-certified products at all until there's a really high volume of trading, open interest trading, which isn't happening right now with water futures. So we submitted a petition in 2021 that asked the Commodity Futures Trading Commission to review this product and remove it from the market because it violates law that we believe, and that water's not a commodity, and that it's so rife for abuse by speculators and market manipulators, but we never heard back. So again, this is a huge issue. Like these commodity markets are allowed to create their own financial products, put it out there, self-certify that they comply with law, and there's no real oversight over them. Huge issue.
I'm still struggling to understand how it is that that the Chicago Mercantile Exchange can just take it upon itself to decide to create this particular financial instrument of trading in futures. Now, most people know the commodities, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange is responsible for commodity trading and things like wheat and cotton and rice, but not water. So, I mean, I don't understand how they get to, in the first place, how they get to just decide that this is going to be a new way to make money. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's the laissez-faire regulation we have over all these financial interests. I mean, it's a broader problem, but right now it's like center and hurting water in particular. In this instance, it's this really laissez-faire attitude toward regulation over financial products. And its potential to really cause harm. We saw that with food tradings. You were talking about how there's like wheat trading, like the commodity
sure.
markets often deal with food tradings, and massive speculation and manipulation of food markets was implicated in global hunger back in like 2 decades ago, like the world food crisis. It was
Right.
associated with these futures markets and manipulation and over speculation on them.
Right. That's when the Arab Spring, when they were rioting for bread, it was because the commodities market had driven the price of wheat so high, as I recall, in my dim ability to remember anything beyond yesterday. But so we have the possibility of serious market manipulation in which somebody would be able to theoretically buy up a lot of contract. How does that work? They buy up a lot of contracts and they sit on them and they drive the price up. Is that how it works?
Sure.
'Cause
So what
I'm not
happens
really
is,
understanding how the actual instrument works. I know it's not,
Sure.
you're not trading water by the gallon, but you are trading speculation on the price of water
exactly.
to consumers, like literally like ratepayers in San Francisco or something. Is that what we're talking about?
So no, so what we're talking about is like investors speculating on water. So they like one
Right.
investor will sell a contract for the future price of water. It's a maximum of 2 years and a certain volume of water trades transactions. And so a speculator sells it. So they enter into contracts with each other. The seller of the contract is betting that the index price will fall and will get paid if it's right. The buyer of the contract is betting that the index price will increase and will get paid if they're correct. So
Mhm.
investors who make the right bet will profit on this like contract that they enter into it with each other. So what does that mean for people, right? I guess that's the
Right.
follow-up question.
That's where
Like,
I'm trying
these
to,
investors
yeah,
are
that's
just
where I'm
playing
trying to
with money,
go.
gambling. But how does that have real-world impacts? But like you
Right.
were saying before about market manipulation and speculation, over speculation on the market. One of the huge issues with this futures market in particular is because of the one of the most concerning parts is that the volume of the futures market could potentially be so much greater than the volume of the underlying water transactions, that financial speculators have a huge perverse incentive to manipulate that underlying market in order to make money on the futures market. This is one of the huge red flags that we raised to the CFTC when we submit the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, when we submitted the petition, is that these speculators have an incentive to manipulate that underlying water market to make more money on the futures market. An investor can acquire futures contracts that are equivalent to about 1/5 of the average deliverable supply of water on the underlying markets underlying the index. And then it's one investor can acquire the equivalent of nearly 1/3 of all water that is actually traded in California in a typical year. So they have a potential to have futures contracts that are so much greater than the underlying market. And with such a large stake, the investor could engage in the trading of a relatively small amount of the underlying water resources to influence payoffs on their much larger futures positions. So they could buy up water rights, hoard them, drive up the price of water to make money on the futures market.
Yeah, that's more or less what I was thinking. And then there's got to be a huge impact, for example, on small farms. I mean, doesn't this have an effect ultimately on what is available in the market as well? Like, if you're not a speculator, you're not engaging in these trades, but ultimately when the prices they're separate from what people are paying, but it will have an economic impact ultimately on, say, somebody who uses a lot of water, like a farmer.
Exactly. And if the market takes off, the futures market takes off, it could lead to much higher water prices in the real world. And small farmers would be hit. They're already struggling with higher water prices, and this could drive small farms out of business. It could also hurt small and disadvantaged communities with higher water bills, especially a lot of communities in California rely on purchased water. So this could increase the price of water for communities. And this is actually a concern raised by the United Nations. So the UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation said, quote, if the speculative dynamics of the futures markets were to have an impact on the price of water on the ground, as has been happening with food, these costs would be passed on to water and sanitation charges, increasing the risk of non-payment and water shutoffs among the poorest, and therefore violations of the human rights to water and sanitation.
Right. I can't say I'm surprised by that quote. I mean, it sounds like the only voice of reason in the room. I mean, where is... So anyway, I guess what we're going to do right now, actually, Mary, is we're going to take a short break for a sponsor drop. And then we're going to come back and talk about your petition and the allies you found in Congress to help you push that through. So we'll be right back with Mary Grant from the Food and Water Watch. Stay tuned.
Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. In Northern Australia, there's a different approach to raising high-quality beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and Northern Territory, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. Westholme stewards 16 million acres of rangeland guided by their natural ecosystem. They're led by a belief that if they balance the needs of their cattle with the needs of the environment, both can thrive. Westholme's team of rangeland experts and nature managers use a variety of tools to monitor and respond to the welfare of the environment, like satellites that assess grass health and on-the-ground research. Cattle are happier when they have the freedom to forage and explore, so Westholme ensures that they can roam wild, foraging at will for the first 2 to 3 years of their lives. Their cows graze on native grasses like Mitchell grass, which is only found in Australia, along with dozens of other plants, herbs, and seasonal legumes. The result is a high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia and a flavor suited to complement any cuisine. Westholme believes that when nature leads, flavor follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
Okay. So, Mary, let us talk now about the petition you filed in 2021. Was that the original?
Yes.
And then, interestingly enough, in April, Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative Ro Khanna from California have reintroduced what they call the Future of Water Act, which presumably they are paying attention to what you're doing? Are you working with them?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So tell us that story. Tell us what happened. How did you get that together?
Sure. That might be the more interesting story than the petition. The petition, like I mentioned, was filed and we never heard back. So it's kind of
right. That's interesting in and of itself, right there. That's an interesting detail. But let us move forward to talk about how you are working to remedy this in our future, because that seems kind of important. So did Ro Khanna and Elizabeth Warren come to you first, or did you approach them, or how did you get that ball rolling?
Yeah, after we didn't hear back from the CFTC. So I guess it is related.
Well, I mean, they reintroduced this bill. They introduced the bill, as I recall, quite shortly after the whole thing got rolling in 2021, whatever it was. So they had to reintroduce it. Why? Because of lack of interest on the part of their colleagues, or somebody shut it down, or they had to rewrite it, or what was the story behind that?
So every Congress, so every 2 years, we have to reintroduce all of our legislation in the new Congress. So they were just reintroducing it in the new Congress because it didn't pass in the last Congress.
Right. And one could ask why that would be. It seems to me that the desire to protect water for your constituency would far outweigh however much money you might be lining your pockets with for your reelection from those same entities. I mean, I don't get it. So anyway, so it is being reintroduced because it didn't pass the first time. Tell us what it says. What is it going to do? It will shut this all down completely, or does it go further? Or not far enough?
No, it's a great bill. It would ban water futures trading outright. So, and it would be clearly defining water and water rights as not commodities, which is huge. It might be the first time in federal law that we can clearly define that water is not a commodity.
What about other countries, Mary? Are we the only ones that are trading water futures, or are you seeing that going on in other countries as well?
So we are the first, so CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, when it launched its product, said it was the world's first water futures market. Right. I've heard that Australia has a lot of water rights trading, and some might be similar to futures trading, but it's not a futures market, is my understanding. But there's been a lot of trading in Australia in particular during their major droughts, and it had pretty devastating impacts on farmers out there.
I can imagine. I've visited farmers in Australia, believe it or not. And water was like literally top of mind. I mean, they breed their livestock to be able to survive on very little water. I mean, that's how serious a problem it is in the bush in Australia, where they raise their cattle, which they do, primarily on pasture. So very interesting that they would engage in this folly, but encouraging that no other country has followed our lead on that. So
it's always a slippery slope.
Yeah, really. So how are you getting a sense of what kind of, if any, traction being made on the Future of Water Act, or is it just kind of in the hopper now and you'll wait to see whether it surfaces and gets a vote?
So it's very hard to move legislation through Congress. Usually we have to attach things that get done. There's like a handful of bills that actually move. These are called vehicles. So one is, there's various water bills that move, like the Water Resources Development Act every 2 years. This bill, the Future of Water Act, is related to like agricultural products, right? So we're waiting to see if we can add it to a bill that would move. Like the Farm Bill would be a potential vehicle. It's too late to add it to this year's Farm Bill, but maybe in the future that could be a place where it moves. But it's very hard to move things through Congress, especially when the House and the Senate are mixed, right? So it has to be a lot of public engagement on an issue. So we think that this is an issue that should be bipartisan and that it should move through the House and the Senate. It's kind of a no-brainer for us that we should define water as not a commodity. Already under the Commodity Exchange Act, things like onions and motion picture receipts are excluded from the definition of commodity. So it just makes sense to add water to that list. Water is not a commodity. It's not. It's a public resource. It's a public trust resource. It's hard to envision it as a commodity. So if we don't pass the bill this year, we are hoping it will move in future Congresses on a vehicle that actually crosses the finish line. And so right now what we're doing is we're building support for the legislation. The bill is short, it's simple, and it just makes sense. So hopefully we can get it done before the water futures market really takes off and starts having profound impacts on rural farmers and households in California.
Yeah, and beyond, because if it takes off in California, chances are it will spread, right? There'll be other areas that feel like, oh, we've got a lot of water around here. I mean, I'm thinking of the Great Lakes regions and stuff like that. I don't know. But in the meantime, I noted in another press release on your website that the National Infrastructure Advisory Council has advocated for privatizing water, which to me sounded like the flip side of the same coin in a way. Am I wrong about that? I mean, if we privatize all water supplies and have no public utilities, doesn't that kind of mean that they can do whatever they want? Raise the rates? I mean, I don't know how well regulated that is. So I'm curious about what the impact of that would be, privatizing water sources.
The impact would be massive and harmful for the public too. So in the water world, we talk about all the various ways corporations and private interests and Wall Street try to control our water. One word is kind of like a wonky word is financialization. So we talk about water futures trading as financializing water. And then we also have like the commodification of water, like bottled water, trading water in plastic bottles. And basically what you're buying is not the water, but the plastic. And then we have water privatization, which typically refers to the privatization of water and sewer systems. So drinking water systems that deliver water to your home and the wastewater systems that collect it and treat it. And this is an area where there's been a lot of privatization activity and several states in particular. And water privatization has been very detrimental to many communities. What's at issue, really at the heart of this issue, is control of water and sewer systems, control of services that are essential, just essential for public health and public well-being. These are public services that deliver a public good that is necessary to protect everyone's health and the environment. And so when you privatize it, there are regulators who regulate water quality, compliance, and there's in some states, they do regulate the rates that are charged. But what we're seeing is that there's a lot of corporate capture of those regulators. There's a revolving door between the regulators and the companies they're supposed to regulate. A really key and telling example of this is the current head of the National Association of Water Companies. This is the private water lobby representing all the water corporations in the country. It's Robert Powelson. Robert Powelson used to be head of the trade group for public regulators, the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. So he used to be head of the public regulators. Now he's head of the private water lobby. So that revolving door is really pernicious, and we think that it erodes trust in the system. What we're seeing is when a system's privatized, it leads to higher rates overall. On average, private companies charge 59% more. That was a couple of years ago. They've also been very good at passing local laws and state regulations that make it easier to hike rates. So we think the cost difference has only grown since then, but they charge statistically higher rates. And a study that we did with Cornell University researchers, Mildred Warner and Shui Zhang, found that private ownership was the single biggest factor driving higher rates, bigger than drought, bigger than aging infrastructure. So for many communities, how they experience or how they know their water system has been privatized is when they are hit with that bill. The bill comes due and they're like, what happened? And they realize that their water system was sold from out behind under them.
Well, I was going to ask you about that for just, as usual, I have to digress a bit. But so, for example, in my own hometown, the town elected to, I guess, sell their water system to a third-party company called Veolia. And I've seen Veolia trucks all over the tri-state area. I live in New England. And, I never, now, mind you, I was living in New York when this happened, but I don't recall ever seeing or hearing from any local friends that there was a referendum on whether or not the town could or should sell their water infrastructure to this company and have them maintain it. So I'm curious about three things, I guess. First is how why does a town make that decision? Secondly, how do they make a decision that is so universally impactful on a town or a community that there is no public referendum, or maybe there is an obligation to that? I don't know. You can clarify. And then lastly, no, I guess that's it. It's really like, why would you sell it? Is it because you don't have the funds in your town to maintain your water infrastructure? Because I know that there are some towns with very sort of unsafe, unhealthy water infrastructure that don't have the money to remedy that. So give us tell us the story of why a town like Wakefield, Rhode Island would sell their water company, or, would sell out to a water company.
Sure. So typically what we see when a city or a town sells their water system to a for-profit company, what is really driving it is the mayor's agenda. A mayor will want funding from that sale to fund a pet development project, to keep property taxes low for other government services. So it's almost universally not about improving the water system itself. It's about using money from the water system, cashing out the water system to fund other government services or projects. We call this taxing through the tap. That instead of being responsible and raising like property taxes to fund government and meet your obligations, you are selling off a major asset, which can dig the hole deeper. It's borrowing trouble. You're digging the hole deeper because you only have so many assets you can sell off. And if you're not addressing an underlying structural deficit, you're digging the hole deeper. And if you're doing it to avoid property tax increases, this is a non-transparent and irresponsible way to raise money because it's not reflective of the services rendered, right? Like if your rates go up, you want all of that money to be dedicated to providing the highest quality service. But what we're seeing with these sales in particular is that companies are offering large sums of money that entice a city to sell, and then they add that to the rates that they recover. And this is one of the main reasons why rates go up so much more after privatization. It's not just that you're paying for the cost of improvements, which is more expensive under private control because private financing is more expensive, but you're also paying for the cost of the sale itself and the company's profit. So the company gets to, when it buys a system, it's known as its asset, and it gets to add it to what's known as its rate base. And how they make money is they earn a rate of return on their rate base. So as they buy and pay more and more money for systems, they add it to their rate base, they make more and more profit. So this is how companies make profit. It is in their interest to acquire and to be really aggressive at buying up these systems. But for households, it's higher and higher water bills.
And not necessarily higher water quality, which I've certainly observed in my hometown. I personally am on a well, my own well, but I have many friends in town, and I see on the town Facebook page, or sometimes even in the newspaper, water quality advisories. Or people will say, my God, the water stinks of blah, blah, blah. What is that? Does anybody else notice it? People are like, oh my God, it's horrible. I can't even drink. I'm thinking like, what is going on here? Like, why are people paying for what is clearly a subpar quality product? And you've just kind of explained it. So I guess my next question would be, there's no obligation on these companies to ensure a certain level of water quality. There must be. They have to be regulated in that sense.
Sure. Every public and private system is regulated to the same standards, the same drinking water standards. Right. So there's federal standards, and then states can have stronger standards. Often that's the case with PFAS, which many states have passed stronger PFAS regulations before the federal government got around to it. So states can have stronger standards, and public and private, regardless of ownership, they have the same water quality standards that they're supposed to meet. One of the things is about things that aren't regulated, right? Because there's a lot of contaminants that aren't regulated. PFAS is a great example about how long and how hard it is to get a new chemical regulated. It took decades of communities organizing lawsuits to try to, and finally EPA finalized regulations, but they don't go into effect for several more years.
And it's only for 6 of those compounds out of 180?
Thousands of compounds.
There's
thousands of chemicals in the PFAS family.
Right.
So it's so hard to get regulations across the finish line. So one of the things that we're seeing with privatization, one of the things that's at stake with privatization is, what if your community wants to be proactive and regulate a contaminant, make an improvement that maybe isn't required by federal or state law.
Right.
When you have local control, you can hold your city council members accountable.
Right.
Say, hey, the water quality is bad, fix it, or we're going to vote you out. I
Right.
mean, that's the ballot box accountability that we have with our decision makers. But with privatization, you're cut out of that decision-making process.
Right.
You don't have access to corporate boardrooms. You can weigh in during rate cases at the Public Utility Commission, but that doesn't determine what projects are being made. You can file a complaint, but if it's not already regulated, the Utility Commission can't do anything. So if you want to be proactive and if you want to address concerns that maybe are outside of the official legal regulations, you need to have that local control in order to make those improvements. You need to have public ownership and democratic decision-making over your water.
That is a very powerful argument, Mary. That is really so true. And then, when it comes to the accountability factor, the point that you have just made that there is no accountability in a boardroom, that is absolutely the truth. I had another point to make, but it went out of my head. So we're moving on to another question, which is, tell us about the Water Affordability, Transparency, Equity, and Reliability Act, also known as Water Act, which is HR 1729S938, House Bill and Senate Bill, respectively. Would that shut down speculation and privatization schemes? How is it different from the act that Elizabeth Warren and Ro Khanna are advocating for, the future of water?
Sure. So Senator Warren and Representative Khanna's Future of Water Act is directly banning water futures trading. The Water Act from Senator Sanders and Representative Bonnie Watsman-Coleman would create a federal trust fund to provide a dedicated source of funding for publicly owned and operated systems across the country, household wells, septic systems, schools, so that we can have a dedicated source of federal funding to ensure safe and affordable water and clean water for everyone across the country. One of the things driving privatization as an excuse, like why the National Infrastructure Advisory Council advocated for privatization, they were saying the needs are so great, let's privatize and get this private financing involved.
Right.
That doesn't work. It doesn't work. But what will work is a dedicated source of federal funding. So the bipartisan infrastructure law that President Biden helped shepherd through provided a big increase in funding. So about $50 billion for water and sewer systems, but it's only a 5-year plan. And the latest EPA needs surveys have shown that our water needs keep increasing. The Clean Water Needs Survey came out in May. They found a 72% increase in needs over the last decade. So needs are just skyrocketing to comply with federal water quality regulations, address climate change, ensure safe and affordable water and sanitation for everyone. So what we need is a dedicated source of federal funding. The latest needs surveys say that over the next 20 years, we need $1.3 trillion, trillion with a T, just to make sure that our water and sewer systems comply with federal law, existing federal law. This is huge, right? And so the trust fund would be the vehicle to do that, and it would provide it from a progressive revenue stream. It would roll back a tiny portion of the Trump administration's corporate income tax cuts. Just a small 3.5 percentage point increase on the corporate income tax rate would fully fund our water systems across the country, create this trust fund to help ensure safe and affordable water. And it would help prevent privatization. It would help support local control of water and sewer systems. So this is the vision that we want. And it's so important too that it's a trust fund. So it's appropriated to community. So it's like dedicated for communities without going through the regular congressional appropriations process. I'm not sure if you're following it. It's happening right now. The House Republicans have proposed a 25% cut to water funding programs. That just moved through committee yesterday, sailed through, massive quarter cut to our water funding programs at a time that our needs have been shown to increase 72%. So this is the wrong direction. Having a dedicated source of funding would bypass these annual spending battles. Every year, it's another spending
Right.
battle. Will we get the spending measure across the finish line in time? Will there be a shutdown? This will ensure that water funding is safeguarded from these political battles, that we have this dedicated source of funding that's backed by a progressive revenue stream, because water and sewer bills are really regressive. They disproportionately hurt low-income families who pay a higher portion of their income on water. So it needs to be backed by this progressive revenue stream and dedicated to water and sanitation across the country. So this is our vision. It's a vision piece. There's more than 100 members in the House and Senate who co-sponsor it. So there's widespread support for it. And I think we are continuing to build support for this vision as like a countervailing force to some of these efforts like the National Infrastructure Advisory Council that's advocating privatization. The alternative is this dedicated source of federal funding to ensure safe and affordable water for every person.
You've made so many points in this last soliloquy that I'm like, oh my God, there's so much I want to ask you. I'm losing my thing. First of all, if somebody privatizes here's one question. If someone privatizes their water supply, like a town privatizes their water supply, would this particular act, for example, this trust fund, would that help them to buy that back out, or is the cow out of the barn? Done deal. You're never getting it back.
Yes, that's a key feature of the Water Act. Is currently under federal law, you cannot use federal loans and funds under the state revolving fund program, the main source of funding for our water systems. You cannot use those funds to buy anything from an unwilling seller. And what we know with water corporations is that they almost always refuse to come to the table and negotiate a return to public control. Municipalization is what we call it. So it always ends up, a locality has to use their powers of eminent domain to say that public ownership is more necessary. It's a court battle. But by doing that process, because the companies refuse to negotiate, they cannot use federal grants and loans. So the Water Act would remove that limitation and provide support for communities to buy their water systems back, to exit privatization contracts, and return to local public control.
I love that. Okay, Mary, next question. You said that there had been a 72% increase in needs, presumably in needs to kind of clean up our water supply. What do you suppose accounts for that?
So the EPA found that it was largely driven by climate change, extreme rainfall events. So this is the Clean Water Needs Survey that came out in May. This is they call it clean water. It's our wastewater and stormwater systems.
Right.
And stormwater infrastructure needs have increased like fivefold. Yes. And it's because of climate change. It's fossil fuel driven climate change that is increasing the cost of our water and sewer services across the country. So how this happens, how the impact of climate change varies based on where you are. California might see droughts, although they did see extreme rain too, and a lot of stormwater.
Sure.
Some places in the Northeast.
They had all those landslides. I mean, it was terrible. Yeah.
And then in the Northeast, often what we see are like extreme rainfall events. So how it impacts our infrastructure can vary across the country, but these the changes in precipitation, the extreme weather, the hurricane, the rising sea levels, all of this has a very profound impact on our water and sewer systems. One estimate put it at $1 trillion alone just to account for climate change.
Yeah, I actually might have seen that. And Mary, before I let you go, there's one more question I have to ask. You said that just yesterday, the Republicans voted for a 25% decrease in funding for our water infrastructure here. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So there is the appropriations process is in full swing in Congress right now. So the House Republicans, the House Committee on the Interior Appropriations Committee for the Interior Appropriations Bill voted yesterday to move the bill. So this is the fiscal year 2025 Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies Bill. So this is all the funding for EPA. And it proposes cutting EPA funding by 1/5. This includes a cut of about $750 million to state and tribal assistance grants. And it includes cutting funding for safe and clean water assistance by 25%. So cutting it to the lowest level that it's been in more than 15 years since it reached historic lows under the George W. Bush administration in 2008.
Wow. I'm not seeing the upside from a political point of view here. Like, is it because people are so ignorant and this doesn't get covered in the media that this kind of stuff goes on, that they can get away with this, or are people on that side of the aisle saying, yeah, sure, we don't need clean water, we'll just buy some?
It's kind of mind-blowing, like how usually water funding has bipartisan support. But what we saw this year and then last year too is that these proposals to gut funding for safe and clean water, all under the mantra of cutting spending and reining in big government. But this funding goes to states, it goes to localities. This is something that usually Republicans support, is giving more money to states and letting states decide how to spend it, right? But it's all under the mantle of like cutting spending. It is reckless. Fortunately, we don't anticipate it passing and becoming law. It's probably dead on arrival in the Senate, fortunately, but it shows you what's at stake with the upcoming elections too. Yes. What would happen in the future? You have to keep in mind, like, what are the policies and visions that people have? So we are hoping that the Senate will reject this proposal out of hand and commit to full funding for critical water programs. And but really what we need to do is pass the Water Act so we can safeguard funding from annual foolish political appropriations battles, that water doesn't become an item on the chopping block during these budget battles.
Right, absolutely. Mary, this has just been fantastic. You are a wonderful speaker, and I really appreciate the breadth of your knowledge. I do hope you'll come back. Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up here, but can you tell people how they can learn more about the Water Act, how they can support that with their congressional representation, be it the Senate, be it the House of Representatives? Let's bang the gong on this one.
Sure. So you can visit us at foodandwaterwatch.org or foodandwateraction.org. And you can take action on our website to urge your member of Congress to co-sponsor the Water Act, to co-sponsor the Future of Water Act, so we can build support this Congress and we can get it across the finish line to protect our water and protect the human right to water for everyone.
Absolutely. Mary, thank you so much for this. It's been great. And I will be calling you again. I want to talk about the implications of the Chevron decision on stuff like our food and water. So we'll be talking about that at some future time. Anyway, thank you so much for your time today, Mary. You've been a wonderful guest. I really appreciate it. I think people learned a lot from this show. And we'll see you, I hope, soon. And thanks to all who sponsor this show and those who tune in on the regular. We'll see you next time. Thanks for that. So long for now. What Doesn't Kill You, Food Industry Insights, is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.